Good morning. Morning, everyone, and thank you for being at the Manufactured Housing Committee, this subcommittee of the task force for to study housing and to find ways to have more manufactured housing in the state of Delaware. This is an important product and has a well-developed legislative section of the code. I'd like everybody to go around the room and introduce themselves and tell them a little bit about themselves. I'll do that last. So, Fred?
Yeah, I'm Fred Neal. I'm a Dover City Councilman, and I'm a rare breed. One, I live in manufactured housing and have done so since moving to Delaware in 2003. I've lived the process. I've worked with DeMoa as a unpaid public affairs officer from 2004 till I was elected to the Dover City Council in 2015. I've known the product. I see what it is to live in a community in the housing, and my view is multiple. One, as someone who has lived here in community in manufactured housing community, and I basically an upscale one. I have looked at it from the standpoint of a city legislator to see the money that is leaving the economy, that the value, no value is received by the recipients who are living in the tenants who live with their own homes in a community and getting very little value out of it. I understand the necessity for housing. I believe that manufactured housing, those that are coming out now, post HUD 1972, whatever, are good products, very worthwhile. I've seen the political upheaval when you attempt to put a manufactured home community in a section that has not been set up zone-wise for manufactured housing. There's an onus with the trailer park, even if the home is not a trailer park, it is a very quality unit. I also want to note there's two different ways that the government charges for a person who is living in a manufactured housing. In the smaller quote trailer park communities, and including the city of Dover, there is a one-time fee. There are those of us who are considered on permanent foundations, which are basically the house is strapped into, that are charged an assessment as they would with any other home that is in fee. So I've lived all of the aspects of what we face. I see the problems that are coming down were things that were community that were financed by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac to be affordable, and suddenly with the stepping in of private equity, they are no longer affordable. And there's the evidence is very clear. As a once upon a time, my professional career was as a newsman. I take it very seriously of bringing evidence and not hyperbole to any conversation that I have in regards to manufactured housing and the problems. Do I believe that it has a role? Yes, it can have a role, but there are so many things that has to be done to make sure that what is supposed to be affordable stays affordable. If we don't nip this thing in the bud and have some kind of rules or regulations ahead of time, as long as there's a shortage of housing, then you're going to lose it as soon as private equity says, I'm going to charge anything you want, regardless of what the laws say in the state of Delaware. And that's my introduction.
Thank you, Fred.
Good morning. I'm Senator Kira Hoffner of the 14th District. I go from Odessa to North Dover. Before being elected, I worked closely with DeMoa, and now I'm happy to work with Jerry Heisler and Rob Tunnel on bills regarding manufactured housing. We have some bad actors from out of state, so this year we are going to try and pass legislation to correct it.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Mimi Rail. I am with the University of Delaware Center for Community Research and Service, I work with Steve Metro, whose name I see up on that screen. I'm also a commissioner with the Wilmington Housing Authority and pretty heavily invested in affordable housing generally. I'm also on the National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Officials Standing Housing Committee and its Homelessness Subcommittee. So really interested in this from the policy side, but also I've worked in real estate development. I've worked there for about 25 years, the last 10 of which were affordable housing development, primarily LIHTC supported affordable housing. This is a critical issue and I'm grateful that I get to participate in this. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Matt Reuter. I'm a former practicing lawyer. I now have a manufactured housing company in Georgetown, Delaware. We started in 2021. I took the company over in September of last year. While we don't build what I'll call a HUD manufactured house, we build modular housing and park model housing, which have been used in similar circumstances. But affordable housing is really kind of the company was started building vacation style homes, and we've transitioned more to affordable housing because of the need. Essentially, we was doing the same thing in state of Maryland as well. Governor's task force there, similar to this one. So I attended the first meeting and threw my hat in for this subcommittee just to provide some insight. Again, it's factory located in the state, and if we can, help and assist. Right now, we build between 300 to 400 houses a year. At the moment, with the capability to build about 800 a year in the current facility.
Thank you very much for attending.
I'm Robert Tuttle. I'm third generation manufactured housing community operator. I've seen everything from operating the communities to I've lived the majority of my life in manufactured or modular homes in our communities. And been through Mass facility. Been up here doing a lot of legislative things, working with Chapter 70. So, I think there's definitely room for improvement here. I also served on Sussex County the last time they did a comprehensive look at manufactured housing, the code. I served on the committee that worked on that, trying to make some updates to the code to make it a little more modern and allow a little kind of less restrictive on placement of homes and things like that. So look forward to working with everybody on the subcommittee. Yes.
Hi, State Representative Jeff Walowski. I represent the 4th District, which is from the bridge in Millsboro to Love Creek and a little bit north of 24 and back to the water. The reason why I'm here is because we have many manufactured home communities in my district. And as their representative, I want to make sure that, not only the folks who live in manufactured housing are represented, but also the people who build and maintain manufactured housing communities are represented. And hopefully we can find a piece of the solution for our housing crisis that we have in Delaware. And so that people who are in the workforce can find a home in a place close to where they work.
Right?
Hi, my name is Greg Sutton. I'm with the Delaware Manufactured Home Relocation Authority. I'm the executive director. I've been there for 8 years now. Retired lieutenant colonel from the Army. My background is operations, and I'm not sure how I got in this position, but I'm here for the past 8 years. So what we do basically, we manage a trust fund. And that trust fund is paid for by the community owners and the residents in the community. And that money is used to, in case there's a change in land use, the community would be able to move somewhere else. And the community owners if the home has been moved, cannot be moved, or has to be demolished. There's money for that as well. And the community owners and the residents pay into a trust fund. We have a 6-member board, 5 of them are voting members. And we meet about every 46 weeks. And we have been in existence for 20 years now. And is a Delaware 25 Delaware Code, Chapter 70, which is the Manufactured Homeowners and Communities Owners Act. And Denver is not a government agency, but we're a quasi-government agency. And I think it's Senator Baumgartner. A couple of years ago, we had a Gmail account. He said, "You guys don't need a Gmail account because some of our emails go into spam." So now we have a Delaware.gov email address. So when we contact people, they know we're legit. And looking forward to getting on the committee.
All those online as well.
Sure. Steve?
Good morning, everybody. Steve Matro, University of Delaware. I'm a professor in the Biden School of Public Policy Administration, also direct the Center for Community Research and Service. As Mimi said, we've worked a bit together in the past. My main area where I'm involved with is homelessness, but also that expands to affordable housing, and have also got done a bit of work looking at manufactured housing in Delaware, and so know enough to get me in trouble, and I'm happy to be part of this group. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Huxtable? You-
Hi, good morning, Senator Russ Huxtable from the 6th District down here in Sussex County. One of the co-chairs of the Affordable Housing Task Force. Appreciate what you guys are doing and the subject matter that you're discussing. All housing options are housing options for that reason. So looking forward to seeing some of the solutions you can come up with, and thanks for letting me participate.
Brandon, if you could just speak for a moment, say how you're involved.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brandon. I'm just the Senate staff helping out with some of the subcommittees. I'm also the legislative aide to Senator Huxtable.
Brandon, this is Caitlin. I believe we have another member, Erin Lee, on the attendee list. Could you promote her to panelist?
Yep, of course. I'll do it now.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm Erin Lee. I'm a realtor with Keller Williams. I've been an agent for about 10 years. I specialize in leased land homes and manufactured house. I've sold about 800 homes in 10 years, but really ramped it up the last 6, closing somewhere between 80 and 100 homes a year. I work alone. I don't have a team. It's just me. I learned about manufactured housing through my brother, who is also an agent and started coastalmobile.com. And he recognized a niche back in 2000. Agents were largely ignoring leased land homes. And he developed a website and grew his business and ran with it. Got so busy that he talked me into moving to Delaware, getting licensed and helping out. I have a Bachelor of Science in Forensic Science, so I'm a chemist by education, but a realtor by career. And I've worked, I'd say, tirelessly the last 3 years. I met with Kira Hoffner a year ago, developed 3 new documents that Keller Williams is using now down in Delaware Beaches area. They're 3 documents. One of them is a notice of listing. One is a notice of intent to sell to a third-party buyer. And then the third is a lease transfer election form, because I noticed that in Title 25, Chapter 70, specifically 7013C, most realtors weren't following the process. And the sellers didn't know the process, the realtors didn't know the process, and leases were getting terminated left and right. So it's become a passion of mine, I guess, to educate my customers and my clients, and also my colleagues. I'm a member of DEMOA. When I owned manufactured housing, my first house in Delaware was a single wide. I was splitting my time between Maryland and here. My Maryland house was in Hagerstown, about 4 hours away. So living in a single wide, I had never been in one. It was a leased land park, Angola Beach and Estates in Lewis. Was very eye-opening. We traded up to a double wide. We kept that for about 6 years. Now we're here full time and we're in a traditional stick-built home. But I think my experiences have really opened my eyes to affordable housing. It's not affordable. And I'm happy to be part of this committee and see if we can affect some change.
Like to explain who I am. I'm Jerome Heisler with the Raybold Group. Second generation, we've been involved in manufactured housing since the 1970s. We also have other types of real estate, residential, rentals, for sale, commercial, industrial. We are primarily in Newcastle County, Delaware. I've been involved in the legislative process since the early 90s, since the zoning process, since the mid 80s. Rob Tunnel's firm and our firm are the last 2 firms that get manufactured housing zoning changes in Delaware. dates back to the late eighties. That's how long it's been since there has been a change in zoning for manufactured housing in Delaware. 35 years. There are a lot of reasons for that. We'll discuss some of them. This is a challenging topic. It's also a very political topic. We are really focused on how to make more affordable housing for Delaware and how to make more manufactured housing available to the people of Delaware. During that time frame, manufactured housing has changed greatly in its construction qualities, in its perception, and its financing to some degree, not a lot. We need and can make manufactured housing part of our overall housing stock. The question is, how do we do it and how politically appetizing it is? That's going to be the real challenge for us. I hope we can make some changes. Our code is one of the most developed in the country. I know that personally because I've written or been part of the writing of it. So has Robert in the last couple decades. We need to really look at the code to make it balanced so we can put more housing in place, not more complicated. There does need to be guardrails to protect tenants who are in more vulnerable financial demographics. That's really important. So we have a lot on our plate. We're not going to be able to address everything. I may ask for a couple extra meetings if everybody can do that, because there's so much to get done here. Thank you.
At this point, we'll move on to agenda item number 2, which is reviewing the task force charge and the subcommittee charge. Bear with me, everyone online, as I work to share my screen. And Brandon, I think you need to change the permission so I can share your screen.
Okay, you should be able to do it now. Yep.
So to everybody online, this is Caitlin Bell speaking. I am Chief Strategy Advisor for DSAA, and I'm just going to go through a few slides again to explain why this task force exists in the first place. So the charge of the overall task force is to make findings and recommendations on how both the state and local governments can promote the production of rental units and homeownership units that are affordable at various income levels throughout Delaware. And this charge is a direct reflection of the 2023 housing needs assessment that DSHA prepared. And what we learned from that assessment is that statewide, we have a shortage of approximately 19,400 rental units that would be affordable for households between 0 and 50% area median income. We also know that the for sale supply of homes in Delaware is out of reach for all but our highest income buyers. Specifically in 2022, 80% of the homes that were for sale in Delaware were only affordable to buyers making more than 120% area median income. So that prices out the vast majority of our potential buyers. We also know from the HNA that we lost somewhere on the order of 6,800 manufactured or mobile homes from our overall housing stock in the past couple of decades. And so that really is why we're here, to try to address our current shortage and also keep up with projected housing demand. The legislation that created this task force was House Bill 442, and it prescribes not only the charge, but how we're supposed to go about fulfilling that charge. So we are tasked with identifying challenges and barriers to increasing supply, identifying potential solutions, and then prioritizing actionable recommendations. For each recommendation, we need to specify who is supposed to implement it. Are we talking about a state agency? Are we talking about the General Assembly? Is it a local government, or is it the private sector? We also need to specify whether our recommendations would require legislation. And again, is that state legislation? Is it a local ordinance? Is it a regulatory change? And will it require funding? The legislation also gives more specific tasks for each of our 5 subcommittees. So the Manufactured Housing Subcommittee is required to have certain stakeholders represented. Those include DEMOA, the Manufactured Home Relocation Authority, and First State Manufactured Housing Association. I'm happy to say that we have ticked all those boxes. And then we are supposed to look specifically at financial options for increasing the supply of manufactured housing, including resident-owned manufactured home communities or ROCs or ROCs. Some of the other subcommittees are embracing the concept of a parking lot. As our chair, Jerry, mentioned, there are going to be a lot of topics that we want to talk about. We may not have time for everything. So to the extent that there are issues that come up that are a little bit outside of our scope, we can still document them in our parking lot. We can refer those issues to other subcommittees if applicable. For example, regulatory and permitting is one of our other subcommittees, and we've already mentioned zoning today, so there may be some overlap there. But anything else that doesn't get referred to another subcommittee, we can still acknowledge in our final report as something that requires further study.
Just doing the line change?
Yes. Sorry, for everybody online, we're gonna try to adjust the volume real quickly.
It's odd that you mentioned parking lot because communities are parking lots for homes.
Yes, not intentional.
I didn't think it was, but it's a double entendre.
Okay, Brandon, could you say something real quick? We just want to test the output. Or anybody else online?
I'm sorry, say it again. Sorry, it's a little hard to hear.
Okay, yeah, well, that's great. We were just trying to make sure that we're not being overpowered by the audio when folks online speak. Is it any easier?
No, I think it's okay. If you could put a mic closer to you, I think it would be clear for everyone online. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, thank you, DTI. Back to the program. So that's our parking lot. And now I'm going to talk briefly about our projected housing needs. And again, these come from our 2023 housing needs assessment. So a couple of things to note about these projections. They are broken down by county, by tenure, so whether the unit should be for rental or homeownership, and based on affordability needs as measured by a percentage of the area median income. The projections assume that we would be maintaining the state's current homeownership rate, which is 71%. But I do want to note that there is a very large gap in the homeownership rate by race. Specifically, white Delawareans have a homeownership rate of 81%. Black Delawareans have a homeownership rate of 51%. So if it is a goal of this subcommittee, this task force, the General Assembly writ large, if we want to close that gap, then that would mean probably increasing our overall homeownership rate, which means we would need more homeownership units than what is actually captured in these projections. And then the last note is these projections are in addition to our existing shortage of 19,400 rental units that are affordable for our households between 0 and 50% AMI. Okay, so this shows you how many units we need statewide just to keep up with growth by 2030. So you can see that we need just over 24,000 new units by 2030. 18,000 of those should be for homeownership and about 6,000 should be for renters. And again, you can see the level of AMI at which those different units need to be affordable. So almost half of the units that we need, 11,815, need to be affordable to households making 100% of area median income or higher. So it's pretty safe to say that the private market can address that. But for all those other columns, 81 to 100% AMI and down, those are units that are going to need some sort of subsidies, incentives, et cetera, in order to offer that affordability to the household. This graph shows the housing units needed specifically in Newcastle County by 2030. Again, that's in addition to a shortage of 12,000 rental units in the county, affordable to our lowest income households. This shows how many units we need in Kent County to keep up with growth. Again, in addition to an existing shortage of 3,300 rental units, affordable to our lowest income households. And then you can see from this last table that most of our housing units that we need are needed in Sussex County. That's where most of our growth is going to occur. And again, about half of those units that we need in the county need to be priced to be affordable for people at or above area median income. But the other half, again, is going to need to be affordable at different levels of AMI. So that is the end of the slides on projected units needed. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take a stab at them. And otherwise, I'm going to Jerry can get the slides loaded for you.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
Thank you. We provided, unfortunately, late information to everybody. I have sort of an academic background as well. So I went digging for manufactured housing information and found a pretty good slug of it. Been collecting some of it over the years, and I found actually one paper put out by a group at Harvard. It's the Joint Center of Housing Studies. Everybody has it. I recommend if you read anything, you read this. It gives a really thorough background of manufactured housing. I'm going to go over some of the highlights right now, and then we'll discuss some of the other topics in a little bit, and then open it up. But this paper gives a pretty thorough overview. It's double spaced, about 50 pages, of where manufactured housing has come from and where it is today. I want to highlight some of the aspects of it using the graphs that they provide in there and some commentary along with it. Delaware sort of mimics a lot of this stuff from what I can tell, and I think it's really important. So let me begin. As you can see, this chart starts around 300,000 shipments, 200 to 300,000 shipments from 76. That's when the HUD implemented its regulations on how to construct better homes for manufactured housing. Up till then, there was no regulations. And for example, you can identify a lot of pre-HUD homes by having a high back window in the bedroom. Just so you know, a real interesting insurance fact. There was a 10-fold increase in death rates for fires in homes because people couldn't get out of the back of their homes. That's how unthoughtfulness existed with manufactured housing back then. In the mid-90s, there was tremendous building, as you can see that hump, and then it settled down quite a bit. The report states that a lot of it was due to lax financing and in some cases fraudulent financing. And there were a lot of foreclosures in around 2000. And at that point, the industry recalibrated itself. There are other reasons that happened as well. Zoning is one of them throughout the US. There just wasn't a lot of available lots at that point. Plus, housing had transitioned to some degree due to much lower interest rates. As interest rates began to drop, manufactured housing became less interesting to people to purchase because they could substitute it. Additionally, manufactured housing has always been more expensive. We'll talk about it because it's classified as chattel. Just an interesting fact, they have these interesting facts in this report. In 2021 American Housing Survey, which is done annually, manufactured housing reported a median monthly housing cost of $660, which is roughly half that of households in single-family homes, which is $1,230, and for multifamily homes, $1,180. So you can see that is a substantial difference. That's what makes manufactured housing very attractive. It's half the cost of the median areas. Next slide, please. Manufactured homes are more likely than any other form of housing to have been built in the past 50 years, with particular high share built between 1970 and 2000. 66% of manufactured home housing stock was built between 1970 and 2000, with 38% of the other stocks that was built during that time frame. So the large part of it is relatively new, not totally new, but relatively new. Next slide, please. According to the American Community Survey, households living in manufactured homes are more likely than any other households to have lower incomes, and few living in manufactured homes have high incomes. 37% of all households living in manufactured homes have incomes below $30,000, compared with 21% of all other households. And you can see how that's scaled on that slide. The manufactured housing stock, oh, all right, you can see how it's compared to pre-built and manufactured homes built later than 2000 and all other units. It's really focused on the affordable housing community. Next slide, please. The manufactured housing stock is not evenly distributed across the United States. And please look at Delaware, how it's sort of cut out there. It's a darker green. A lot how that has to do, we're highly concentrated in Sussex County with the retirement community or with second home community, which Robert is very much involved with. It's not evenly distributed across states and across markets within the US. While accounting for less than 6% of the homes nationally, the manufactured housing share exceeds 10% in 10 states that are largely in the Southwest and the West, with 16% in New Mexico. I've traveled a lot in New Mexico in the last couple of years. I drive a lot of the West. In New Mexico, manufactured housing, and we'll see this in a minute, is highly unregulated, but also the Indian reservations play a big part in the use of manufactured housing. They also have an interspersed, it's an equal right state where you can just about put it anywhere you want, next to $3 million homes, anywhere else. That's a political consideration, one we're going to talk about a little bit. Next slide, please. So, as you can see, manufactured housing is concentrated primarily in two areas, the South and the West, not so much in the Northeast and Midwest. And there are specific reasons for this. We'll talk about it a little bit. Across the US, because actually Delaware has all three of these conditions. Across the US, manufactured housing accounts for 14% of homes in rural areas, compared with 8% in small and medium-sized metropolitan areas, up to 1 million in population, and only 3% in the largest metropolitan areas. One of the driving forces of that is called a market condition, which is the cost of land, not surprisingly. One aspect that has occurred in the last 20 years, which is problematic for manufactured housing, especially in Delaware, is the infrastructure cost, on-site and off-site infrastructure costs for creating a manufactured home community. It's just really expensive. Robert and I were talking a while back, and it's probably cost a minimum of $100,000 per lot to go through all the permitting, to get the infrastructure needs, school taxes, and so on to get it in place.
Per individual home lot?
Per individual home lot, that's a significant amount. $80,000 to $100,000, let me put it that way. Either way, it's a lot. We used to build them for $15,000. So you're talking, in the case of putting a single wide in, there's two types of homes, single wide and double wide, or triple wides. We don't see them around here that much. But it's actually, you can buy a single wide for less than the infrastructure cost for a new home. That's problematic. Next chart, please. So hang on, I'm going to read this and hopefully it'll make sense. Ranking counties by share of the housing stock that is manufactured housing. These homes make up 20% of the housing stock in the counties in the highest quintile. So what they did was they went to the American Home Community Survey and they looked at the 3,000 counties, 3,200 counties in the US, and they wanted to see how each county behaved, and they split it up into quintiles, and they looked at the lowest share of manufactured homes, the middle quintile, and the highest quintile. And I think what what is the most striking aspect here is looking at the very first line where it goes 2.4, 10.7, and 28.1. That's mean share of housing stock, that is manufactured housing as a percentage. And then if you go down, let me find it. Where's it now? The mean price of a single family lot. That's gonna be the key thing, right here, it's 4 lines down. And by looking at that line, you see lower cost of land, the higher the density. There's a really critical relationship between that and manufactured housing. So if we're gonna use manufactured housing as part of communities, we have to somehow focus on that relationship between the cost of the land and the ability to get affordable housing in place. Because if the land per unit is too high, it will never work. It will never, yes.
So, this is based on how many, houses per acre or half acre?
Let's say the mean price for a single family lot in these counties. So in the lowest share of manufactured housing, it was $434,000 per family lot. So you're talking very dense areas, big cities. Middle quintile would be, we would probably be in that area. And then where we would find out in the Midwest or wherever in the West, where it's much cheaper in the South, land on a per family lot basis.
So, what I thought I heard you say is that, it costs $100,000 per.
In Delaware, it does.
$100,000 per house.
$80 to $120,000.
And
Do you agree with that, Robert?
the density per acre is what?
In Newcastle County, we can get about 4.5 to 5, given all the regulations.
Okay, how about Sussex?
Robert.
Sussex, you're probably still around 2. The most dense community we have is just under 3.5 units to the acre.
Okay,
But so there's a.
so that's $300,000 per house. I mean, there's $100,000 per house and 3 to an acre.
I think the 100,000 probably includes the cost of the land for you. I mean, because it would definitely be cheaper in Sussex. You're probably in the, infrastructure all in, you're probably in the 65 to 80,000 range, maybe. Just, I mean, by the time right now, the county sewer impact, just sewers over $7,000. Water, we just installed electric in a new phase of a residential subdivision with over $3,000 a lot just for the electric installation. So when you add that all in, with cost of roads and permitting and infrastructure, it's, I mean, you're getting up there in that, 65 to 80,000 range, depending on the density. So I mean, if you had to give the same amount of land and you could, the more homes you can put per acre, then the.
Does that include your land, Robert? If you were to go out at market prices today, would that include land?
The 60 to 80?
Yeah.
No, that would not, that'd be
Just
after you're off the property. Yeah. And that's, I mean, that's running as, you talk to some of these bigger developers and traditional subdivisions, and they're in that range as far as construction costs on a per unit basis. And, years ago, that was a lot lower, but.
How many acres are your average property?
Really, the Potness Lakeside's a little bit, just shy of 3.5. Everything else is right around 2 to the acre, and a lot of that's.
No, your whole development, how many acres is it?
We are with all the things, we're probably 3,800 acres or so.
For one community?
No, in total.
No,
Sorry.
I'm trying to figure out, like, when I drive up to a community and, there's 60 homes on there or whatever, how many acres is that community? One, like you have.
It would depend on what the community is, and it depends on what it was zoned, like the communities we zoned in the late 70s, early 80s. You had to put the homes on 10,000 square foot lots, so you were less than 2 units to the acre, really. When you factor in the infrastructure, open space, and everything else. So, and a lot of that was a factor of, utilities. That was, you had to have an individual septic on each lot and everything. When you have sewer involved, then the property can get more dense. But really, that for us, like that 3 to 3.5 per acre that's about the max density to have a nice community. I feel like if you get more dense than that, it doesn't.
They're on top of
They're on top of each other. Yeah.
You piqued my interest with the second part of the question. For your more recent subdivisions, are you 5 acres, 10 acres? What's your
So it's
typical
manufactured
size?
housing, the most recent one we have zoned, was in, I think we received approval in 1988, and we built it and it was open in 1992. There's only been one community I know of in the state that has been permitted since then, and it was not built.
How big is that project?
So that project was about 460-ish units.
So on about 100 acres?
No, more, a little more than 100 acres. I don't have the total.
No.
Right, it's
Yeah,
100.
but that one was about 3.5.
It'd be really interesting to be able to come and see that and get a sense of the feel of it.
Well,
Greg,
I
you
walk
have-
around them, so I'm like, how many
Oh,
homes are actually here?
My question didn't have to do with acreage, but to do with, the actual parcels and stuff. So what I deal with is with communities, that some community owners may have 20 homes on separate tax parcels in the same community, but then most of them are on same tax parcel.
We have a single tax parcel in most of our communities.
Is there any advantage to putting them on separate tax parcels? Other
A lot of it has to do with code. In Newcastle County, you would not put it on a separate tax parcel. You can't. Actually,
We had a member of, I think, the legislature who had it in Sussex County of the tax parcels. He didn't fall under any of the laws dealing with manufactured housing. And we're talking about the difference of going forward of what it would cost to put in higher price land and higher expenses for all the utilities that have to go into it, the roads and what have you, versus what is already
In place.
taken place. So taking place, it also in terms of what does the city have or what was the requirements for, let's say, my community on how much land they have. So each of those may differ by subdivision or by county. So we're looking forward, we're not looking back. And those figures going forward are going to be higher than they were when the land was originally purchased. I did a study when I first came up here because of my background. And I said, hey, wait a minute, we're losing it because here, what occurred was those teachers who were coming to Sussex for the summer, now those became permanent homes. And then that pricing even started to evolve, to be removed that time. And now this time it's even worse because you've got a shortage of 19,400 units for rentals, whether it's houses, whether it's apartments, or whether it's leased land. So if we're supposed to be looking forward, can we afford to do that? What would the land be? Is it too expensive? The houses are the cheapest part. And even the quality manufactured housing is still the cheapest part. Can it stay that way? And I think that's one of the problems that we're facing.
we're gonna pace, yeah. So let me just finish up this slide real quick. The counties with the highest share of manufactured housing had 84 people per square mile. And the counties with the lowest share of manufactured housing had 2,200 people per square mile. Just to show you that. Next slide, I'd like to talk about the barriers to greater use of manufactured housing. Oh, you don't have that. You can just leave it on that slide. I'm just going to talk to it. A review of the literature reveals several clear themes. Negative perceptions, which Brett already mentioned, of the quality of manufactured housing, which has changed greatly. Zoning and land use restrictions that limit adoption in many communities. And you have to look at that from two perspectives, the state level and the local level. Market conditions that erode cost advantages of manufactured housing. We just talked of one, the land cost. And it makes it difficult for consumers to acquire these homes, that is the financing capabilities. Being treated as chattel does not allow them to get the best mortgage rates for their homes out there, or financing rates in the case. Perhaps the most fundamental challenge facing the industry is the perception that manufactured housing is of inferior quality and aesthetic appeal. And in fact, one of the papers that is provided is written by a master's thesis out of Georgia, that talks about how to use infill and manufactured housing and coming up with architectural standards. So it matches what's in that community and is no longer a concern.
Is there any discussion there? It came up recently in Worcester County, with insurability of manufactured homes. And people are trying to sell their manufactured home and they couldn't get insurance. Because the insurers, the private.
What county was it?
Worcester County, Maryland.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that, but
But I think it's become a real big issue because the private insurance companies have stepped up and said, you know what, over a certain year of age of a manufactured home, we're no longer going to insure it.
right, and there are a number of technical reasons, we can talk about that later, but
Yeah.
a lot has to do with how it was installed.
This was all just based on age.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, that's a
Yeah.
structural issue then
Got
as well, so there's a
Yeah.
couple different reasons.
No, I just was wondering from a barrier to entry situation, is that something that's come up in the papers that you've had about the insurability of them longer term?
I
You
think
want to say something?
that it's probably a pretty recent thing too. I think.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
and that's more of how they can build.
In Florida, I know they're not insuring any homes in Florida.
Oh, wow.
You know?
Right,
And it's less likely, if it's not attached to the land, I have a paper on that as well in there. The appreciated value changes, that is. Manufactured housing depreciates, but if it was attached to the land, it was proven that it appreciates the same rate as non-manufactured housing. A second key theme, which is clearly related to the first, is how zoning and land use regulations in many jurisdictions exclude manufactured housing or make it exceedingly difficult to site in neighborhoods where single-family homes are predominant. That's a big issue, and it's a political issue as well. There are equal rights states for that. There's 10 of them, and it works. Some have architectural standards, which I did have provide a paper on as well. A third set of key factors is housing conditions. That's cost of land and supply chain needs. Manufactured housing, unlike stick-built housing, can be built several hundred miles away and brought to the site. And that's a big difference, but it's the same thing with modular housing as well. So again, market conditions, the housing supply and access to financing are all big concerns. Overall, there is strong evidence that difficulty in obtaining financing, particularly mortgage financing, is a significant obstacle to greater adoption of this type of housing of home for affordable home ownership. In particular, the much higher cost of chattel lending, which can be double to triple depending on the credit rating, easily swamps any advantage to the cost of production of a manufactured home. Next slide, please. This was a really cool slide, I thought. Was this it? No, the slide back of this, I'm sorry. Figure 7. This is a perception of problems, so to speak, of manufactured versus site-built, and how, since the regulations have been in place, a 10-year look back, and how construction methods have improved with manufactured housing. And I think that's compared to site-built housing, this is really an important quality perspective of manufactured housing. As a review of research over the past several years makes clear, the quality of manufactured housing has improved significantly over the past decades. It's demonstrated by reduced levels of inadequacy, the high levels of residential satisfaction and rates of price appreciation that are similar to conventional housing. By the way, just so you're aware of something, manufactured housing appreciation, even in parts, has exploded in the last 2 years, where we were selling single wides that were $5,000 5 years ago, they're worth $30,000 now. So because there's such a demand for affordable housing, we're seeing prices explode. And we've never seen that, at least in our company's history of 50 years. This shows you where, next slide, please, the manufactured housing is sort of concentrated in which states. Again, you can see Delaware is a little bit different. This is where you have low concentration in high-priced homes and so on. It's just an overall view showing that in the Mid-Atlantic region, New England and California areas, you have higher priced homes, therefore you have less concentration of manufactured housing. Delaware is an outlier there. And then in the rest of the country, lower priced land, more concentration of manufactured housing. Next slide. This is looking at different metropolitan areas. The Philadelphia, Camden, Wilmington area is on here. And this is the percentage of manufactured housing stock in various areas. And interestingly enough, our metropolitan area has 0.3%, very low, actually one of the lowest in that whole list. So there's a lot more we can do, but we have to figure out land price is one of them. Next slide, please. This is looking at those quadrants again, and nothing more than that, looking at moderate income renter households by county share and the cost quadrant. And basically, it's going to say the same story again. We have, we could do better in our concentration of manufactured housing, and we just haven't done that. You can, and the next slide goes through this next thing. I just want to go over a summary of the findings here. I'm not going to go crazy on this, but a review of the existing research and manufactured housing highlights several important obstacles to greater use of housing, which offer significant cost advantages at a time when more affordable entry-level housing is in short supply. Most fundamentally, despite significant improvements in the quality of these homes, manufactured homes, over time, negative public perception of both quality, aesthetic appeal, manufactured housing remains widespread. Although recent Freddie Mac surveys find that a majority of certain population segments would consider a purchase of manufactured homes, substantially 39 shares who are unfamiliar with these homes or thought that they were poor quality and less likely to appreciate, indicating misperceptions remain fairly commonplace. Local governments are a key role in this. States are a key role in this. Developers are key to this. And it takes everybody to work together to make it happen. Some communities are experimenting with government land and putting that in play for manufactured housing. We have had one of the charges with our aspect is resident-owned communities. We've had 2 involved in manufactured housing in the state of Delaware, but it just hasn't occurred because there hasn't been an interest and the price of the communities are so high. They don't have an ability to do that. The thought is, can the government provide some financing for ownership of these communities if they go up for sale as another way of promoting that purchase? There's some opportunities there. The question is, which ones are we going to really look at and focus on? The other side of it is in Delaware, at least in Newcastle County, the experience in going through the land use process is so long and brain damaging, having that done that only too well. It takes years to get it done. Affordable housing, given the fact it's more regulated and more controversial, nobody really wants to enjoy that experience. It's really contentious. So we heard the term by right. I'm not sure what that really means when I hear it anymore, but we need to figure out ways that allow this alternate type of housing become mainstream and put in place.
I can give some history on regards to the legislative process when we tried to buy our community. My documents that are in your packet do contain some of that. And the fact is that after 2 years, if a community owner did not want to, wanted to sell, but didn't want to sell to the homeowners, the legislature refused to extend the law. And at that particular point, they could sell for less than what we offer. As it is, with private equity coming in, purchasing it for $5 million, more than we could have obtained through Rock USA. I mean, we would have bought it for 11 million. They bought it for 16 million. Now we're paying that 16 million through the rents and the breakdown of the sheets that we have. So unless the legislature would have been willing to even extend it, we couldn't have bought it, and we couldn't have been able, seniors could not have gotten the money. There's no way we were able to get the money to do that. So that community, I don't see how you can, in this environment where private equity will scoop it up, that you're gonna ever be able to get the money to finance it in order to do it. And if you do, you have to have professionals to manage that community, because you can't depend upon whether it's seniors or others having the time to do so. You have to actually have a professional management as part of the agreement that they're gonna come in, they're gonna make sure that what has to be purchased, what has to be done is done with the oversight of the maybe others.
So, I knew that was, so you're gonna speak first, Fred. Well, we'll switch it around here. I have you on number 3. We'll let you-
Okay.
All right.
Follow yours.
Well, we were talking about resident-owned
I
communities.
think with the resident communities, it's kind of twofold. You're looking at, is there a way to increase the purchasing of the existing? And then how do you build new ones that could be resident owned? It's twofold.
One of the problems is you're going forward. The cost of the home is going up, the cost of the land is going up. So where do you get the break to say that you can do that? With the existing communities, there is a chance to do it. But if you are dealing with competing with private equity, and I know from my experience in Demoa, what has occurred is that within the industry, one company sells for tax advantages for a higher price, so that the communities get passed around from Sun, Home America, all of these MHC, ELS, so that the money that I call it double billing, because I paid most of the first company that developed my community to Fannie Mae. Now I'm paying RHP, part of a conglomerate,
But there's not
a higher amount.
There's
So
not been,
how can I beat that? I can't
there's
beat
not been a
that.
community in Delaware that was bought by a REIT that then just turned around and flipped to a REIT. RHP and
But-
resold them.
But they
So, I mean,
do it across the country.
Right.
They may not do it here. Okay,
Well,
remember, I was studying in that time period of seeing how this one would go here, because the IRS has certain tax advantages, just as if you sell your house or buy a house, whatever.
Fred, we're
there's
sort of
tax
getting off
advantages.
topic here. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna, there's 2 things we're asking a question about with this type of housing. The first is the affordable tranche of it, and how can we put more in place? The second part of this housing question is something that's really not talked about, which is if it costs $400,000 to buy a new townhome in Newcastle County as a starter home, or even used home are $350,000. And manufactured housing, I could buy a new double wide for $125,000. There's a gap there. How are we gonna fill that gap? We're talking about people in the 100% median income or 80% median income world. And then we have the other world, which is the 40% and below. So how are we gonna address those 2 affordable housing markets? And how can we make it work? The resident-owned community is a great way to do it and to lock in rates. But the fact is, I don't know many developers that are gonna build a resident-owned community from the get-go, go through that brain damaging experience and get $1 at the end. That's not gonna happen. So that's gonna have to be a joint venture with a nonprofit or a nice developer and government land to make that happen. That's step 1. Yes,
Just to put some clarity around it, do we have a chart of, and I'm sure it's not gonna be that specific, but we're talking about, 0 to 30% AMI, and up to 100%. Is there a way to put home, or monthly spending figures to those? Do we have that chart? Just that would
I
be
don't know if we have
helpful.
that chart, but we can get that.
Okay, that would just be helpful in my mind when we're talking about 100% of AMI. Is that a $250,000 house?
Well, it varies by county.
No, for sure, but I, just to get some perspective.
Yeah, Newcastle County for family of four, it's about $100,000 at 100%.
100 to 100%.
So we do have those figures in our housing needs assessment. It tells you like the max affordable rent based on your percentage of AMI, but those numbers are a couple years outdated. They're based off of 2021 American Community Survey estimates. So I can see if we can go back and redo the math.
Sure.
And especially for homeownership, we're gonna have to factor in like current interest rates and all that. So all that is to say, yes, we can get it to you,
Yes.
but it needs to be updated.
No, I was just thinking that would be a, you know, if you're saying, all right, we want to hit 100% of AMI,
Yeah.
what's that number?
What's the overall price point you want to hit?
Exactly.
The other issue is, which most people aren't aware of, Fred is, and I know, Greg is, and I know Rob is. Manufactured housing is treated differently. I'm not beating up the state housing authority, but manufactured housing is not treated the same as non-manufactured housing. If you look at the amount of vouchers for subsidized housing, they have significantly fewer, how many are there, 10 or 20 now? Vouchers that manufactured housing, for rent vouchers for manufactured housing.
I couldn't tell you how many of our vouchers are being used in a manufactured housing unit right now. But they can be.
Yeah, it can be, it just isn't, I hear the
Do we have available for that program?
For which, okay, so that, all right, vouchers, this is a really big, hairy topic, right? There's housing choice vouchers, which are federally funded. The SHA administers them, but so do the 4 other public housing authorities in the state of Delaware. There are SRAP vouchers, which are state rental assistance program vouchers. They operate similarly, but on a referral basis from our partner agencies at DHSS and the Kids Department. There are particular vouchers for special populations, so VASH for veterans, COPWA for individuals living with HIV and AIDS. Like it's,
Okay.
I can't give you specific numbers off the top of my head because it's a really big universe.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of nuance there.
So like, my understanding is there's about 15 to 20 families that get vouchers in the state of Delaware for manufactured housing. Also, when you look at subsidies for fixing up homes, many times manufactured housing doesn't qualify for it. So the question is, how can we just bring these basic needs to manufactured housing residents? That's a parking lot issue for me. That we can get them the same rights as other stick-built houses have. I think that's really important.
And
Yes.
before you move on that, this is existing manufactured housing.
Right.
It's enormous rehab needs either on the rental side or for sale side. I would expand that parking lot issue to deal with how can we down the road help stabilize the existing affordable housing, manufactured housing stock. We did a little work for Habitat about a year ago, trying to quantify some of those needs. That's different than what we're doing here.
Right,
It's
I'm
a
just-
different future
What's
consideration.
happening, it was going to manufacturing housing.
Oh, yeah, they're doing it. They're doing
And
it. They
then
did all 3
fixing up.
counties.
Okay.
Yeah, they were trying to integrate and expand their programs. We did some research for it.
Okay.
Great parking lot issue for the next group.
Okay, I'm gonna start charting these parking lot days so we don't forget them. So if you could repeat, Jerry, the first thing you said,
Vouchers,
vouchers. And so again, it's
that may actually be a big thing for us anyway going forward. That's about the only way we're gonna be able to get people in the lower median households to be able to get into newer housing, or even older housing for that matter.
yeah, the one thing I want to stress though is like currently, there's nothing that's preventing somebody with a regular HPV voucher from using their voucher in a manufactured home. It's contingent upon our landlords of manufactured housing to familiarize themselves with the program, right? Like it's not that there is a restriction.
Correct.
All right, and then.
Well, that's for the state program, for the federal program there is, correct?
I don't think so.
I thought the federal program didn't allow manufactured housing unless it was a permanent foundation.
Well, that I don't know, but there are no.
I think you might talk about financing.
Yeah.
No, I was told, maybe it's too old, but I was told a long time ago, vouchers weren't allowed unless it was permanently tied to the ground.
I don't have that understanding.
All right.
I do know regardless, if you're gonna use a voucher anywhere, that unit has to pass inspections,
Right.
right? And those standards are set by HUD.
Okay.
Kind of my
that
point,
kind of
housing
clears
quality
up.
issues. How do we invest individually and collectively in stabilizing and improving existing manufactured housing stock, whatever form that might be, for the benefit and support of renters and homeowners who are existing in those units?
So I guess the first, we'll go back to item 2, resident-owned communities. The law that's in place, first right of offer, I'm the guilty party who wrote it. I came out of an academic paper out of NYU back in 04, I think it was. And then it was passed in 08. Chris White, who was head of community legal aid, worked with me on that drafting. And we came up with a series of balances for that to occur. It's trying to balance the right of the landlord to be able to sell his community without having a chilling effect of getting locked into a period of quietness where nothing's going on other than the homeowners are looking for financing, which could take months and years. So why should we be held up on trying to sell our community? So we're trying to balance that need between both parties. And if not, our parks are rendered valueless if we can't sell them. So how do you get both parties involved? At that time, I also talked to Rock, resident, the community advocates that are proponents of resident-owned communities and have been successful at it. And they felt that was a fair setup at what we had. And the problem is, and since that period of time, since 08, the value of manufactured home communities has become so valuable, it's been out of reach for residents to purchase. Very expensive. And that's sort of where it is at this point. We should look at it. I'll get some literature. I don't know if I provided any literature on it, but I can provide more literature on it. It's just that the ability of the home residents, the residents in the homes, getting a group together, an active civic organization, and being prepared for it. Additionally, they need to have a management company involved, which isn't always the easiest to get in Delaware because unless it's a national management company for them, there's no local parties here, and that becomes a little bit hard as well. You don't want to have there are some horror stories out there with residents managing their own parks and getting in disputes, and then residents giving their friends advantages, and then somebody says they don't like Fred for some reason, and then Fred is mishandled and so on. So there has to be a balance there. So we want to be careful with it. It has been successful in New Hampshire, I know that.
And that's why we have ombudsman for common interest communities as well. So
I'm wondering if there might be experiences in Maryland or other related places, or property management firms who might be willing to cross that border.
There are not so much Maryland, they're more national, but the real issue becomes some communities then languish and don't get the infrastructure replenishment they need, and others are kept up very well. In Florida, it has been very successful. The problem in Florida now is insurance.
Sure, I was thinking more specifically,
Yeah.
a little enclave or a little state and who we can pull from.
But I don't know of any, we do not have a turnover of communities. There's only, how many communities are there? 200 and some?
179.
179. We don't have a sale of communities compared to other states. They just doesn't come available.
They're talking about property management companies.
Right, there are a number around.
Here, but easier to pull from the region to get them across state lines and do work here. If that's one of the deficiencies. I'm not aware of this.
It's not a deficiency. They have to go out and find that. The park owner isn't going to stay in the business, so they have to find their own if they want to do it that way. Again, if you talk to people who do resident-owned communities, they're both sides of it, where you have some communities that manage their own, and then others who sub it out.
well, if you remember, I did say that it's essential to have professional management simply because the people do not either have the skills or do not have the
Correct.
time. So the
But-
oversight comes from the owners, but the fact is you need profession, no question about it.
Is there any thought, and again, going to Maryland, I was born and raised in Delaware, but I've lived in Maryland for quite some time now. But Maryland last year joined Maine, in allowing manufactured homes on any R1 zone property. And that was a big step. It had a bunch of pushback.
You can put manufactured homes on a farm site.
It was any R1 zone,
And
so any residential zone.
The equal
property,
rights,
you could do
that's,
a single family.
that's the equal rights we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah, I was just saying, instead of doing a community and you run into management issues and everything else, is there a thought to make that push in Delaware?
So,
We have
time
a
out.
lot of
So-
homes that are not in.
Okay.
So zoning, that's a zoning question, that's done at the county level. So it's a question whether is the state going to start mandating.
And that's what Maryland
Subdivision.
did. Maryland jammed it down to the counties and said, sorry, but your zone has to allow manufactured housing on residential zone. So it was there was a big pushback there.
Let's, when we talk about, entitlements, number 5, design-based regulations, can MAC be used for infill housing?
Sure.
We'll do it there, and I recommend to have a fuller discussion of it, at least the papers that are part of the email. I would read those papers first, because maybe we require design guidelines for that in historical communities and so on. Because it was talked about, this one took place in Georgia, so it's a potential and it's a really healthy discussion to have. But, you know, and you can do it now, the question is, how do you want to do it?
It was just signed into law this last session in Maryland, so I don't know how it's been implemented yet, or if it has, because you're right, local counties can still control certain, you know.
Yeah, I don't think Chevy Chase, Maryland's gonna be welcoming, manufactured housing tomorrow morning.
we'll
And if
see.
they do, which I can see it happening, it's gonna look very similar to what historically is in there.
Sure.
So it's worth it, a really great discussion.
Sure.
And that similarity, that those design reviews are not unusual. We've tried to do some of these projects in California some years ago, a long time ago. But Coffin was really successful in doing mobile home manufactured housing for manufactured housing communities because their design standards were exceptional. Their homes they built, stick built, weren't so great, but the design guidelines that they adhered to brought their homes into compliance with what was recommended.
So the only thing, I want to really reserve topics for that, but to follow up with you, Mimi, the problem with design guidelines is that you can make them so restrictive, you can't put a manufactured home in there.
It eviscerates the rule, right?
Right, and the problem is, you just think of a spectrum from restrictiveness to not restrictiveness. Right now, manufactured housing is really restricted. You want to be careful as a politician, how not restricted you want to make it.
And even beyond the kind of even local government level, there's a number of subdivisions that have restrictions where in the deed restrictions, you can't have manufactured modular homes in them.
Right,
So
so
things like that even if you change the zoning, you may not still be able to.
well, no, you would have to enable something from the state level to get rid of that, just as you have religious and racial and ethnic deed restrictions in some communities in North Wilmington. So, there's various communities that have that. I won't go into them. So I will get information on the Rock. I'll talk to Rock, get some information on their latest data and other aspects for our next meeting, or maybe a little workshop in between. Everybody's willing to do that. Fred, I'd like you to talk a little bit about your stuff. I think it's really important that you talk about your letter and your concept going forward and going from there.
Yeah,
And then we can have a full discussion of it.
yeah, I want to basically,
His letters are part of the information I sent out to you.
yeah, well, first one was fix the leaky pipes before we repave the road. Double billing, killing housing meant to be affordable. One, I'm a realist. Landlords should be paid for what they do. No question about it. The problem is that what was started out to be affordable housing by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac disappeared because of private equity coming in. We're now paying, and I basically listed under the phantom expenses, why are they short? I mean, this is across the country, this is just not here. Why is it happening? Why is this happening? And it's happening because they're not showing what they're paying. I do not believe in his social consciousness that he has ever hit the top level of rent increases. His rent increases have been reasonable. They used to be very reasonable, but they aren't anymore. And the examples that I provided in the phantom expenses is a perfect example. Management fees. Look at the management fees. I pay 15.91%, $71.78. This was in 2019. I have documents today that we received yesterday that my rent is going to be going up in 2025, $38 based on HB 317. But in 2026, I'm going to pay additional $28 in back taxes for property taxes, which is listed in the law. So in 2026, in addition to whatever it goes up, compounded rents for that year, as listed, that's kept the list by Greg's group, I'm going to be paying $66 per month more. I'm not getting anything. And in one of my documents that I sent to Caitlin, the tree goes down, they're not replacing it. I can't get away with that as a city councilman. When trees went down on Bradford Street, they hullabaloo. And we brought the state in to make sure that the state foresters took a look at it, see what we could save, so it would not have to come down. And it's a health giving thing. They're not going to spend any more money than they have to. I have the breakdown. If anybody wants to see it, I may have sent it to you. Here's the breakdown of 2019 that they submitted to get a lower property tax rate, which we pay. Now they're going to collect back. So anything that you do going forward has to be with the idea that if you're going to build it for affordability, how do you keep it affordable? And I think the only way you can do that is to take a look and see what are legitimate expenses, do what we do with utilities, pay the money based on what we do with utilities. It costs you this is a legitimate cost. And you should get a profit based on what you're doing. It encourages maintenance. If you don't have those regulations that you don't look, you get slumlords. We have slumlords in communities. Kings Cliff, low income. Selling houses without the titles so that the buyer who doesn't know any better knows that they cannot sell their house because they need the title to sell their house. We have better laws in the city of Dover than we do in the state, including the fact that you get a receipt for when you pay your bill, that pay your rent. And the reason for it is person doesn't pay their rent late 4 times, you can move them out. They have no proof. And some people expect a cash. We're collecting cash for it. So how do you prove that you weren't late 4 times and you lost your house? So here you have the laws that we have, we've changed it. If somebody is selling a shell of a house, they're spending money to get the house fixed. And so they put it out on a credit card or debit card, and then they can't pay the rent, they lose the house. The community owner now buys a house out of the sale that's forced, and they can sell it for a higher price. We require that it go through that is examined for habitability. Make sure that that is a safe home that person can move into. That's not in the state. That's just in the city. And if they're selling a house without a title, if we can discover it through our code inspectors, they have to report it to the DOJ to take some sort of action, because it's a universal problem that you know as well as I know. Where's the title? Who has it? And how do you take care of it? So if you're going to do this, What I'm saying is you have to take a look to how do we keep it to be affordable? Why do I have to pay now $660 a month to pay a second mortgage after I paid the first one off? And I'm paying it, and it's nothing, I know I have to pay it. I know there's nothing I can do to get out of it. I can't, that's it. So I'm paying twice for the affordability that disappears. So if you're going to do this, what I'm saying, presented the documents, you can look at it, you can check it. It's not hyperbole, it's real stuff. How do you do that? And the breakdown of the law, anybody who wants to see this, I'll be very happy to send it. It's RHP. And I got a ruling from the city solicitor saying, can I use this? And he said, yes. The only thing is that your math, you have to better tell people that this is your math, that it's not there. So that what I say is 2 management fees in here, 2 different management fees that are adding up to the 660, pardon me, they're adding up to the 15.91%. Supplemental management fee, $45,000. Management fee of $693,000, an administrative fee, all of, where does the political contributions come from? I suspect the management fees are for companies that have been the investment companies who have enabled them to purchase this. That money goes back into basically the investors' money. That's where the money is siphoned off for the investors. Who pay? How many of those actually pay Delaware taxes? We're paying a property tax. So who's paying the income tax? And who are the investors are paying income tax to? So that money is going out of the state. And then when you add it up, the totals from my 223 home community to all of the communities out here, how much money is leaving the Delaware economy? And I keep pointing out, and I jumped on board Senator Huffner. Nobody in the state legislature knows the aggregate amount. The aggregate amount, I don't need to know what you take out. I don't know what you take out. I don't know what Frank Fee takes out. I want to know the aggregate amount of the money leaving the state. It is humongous. Because it was $100,000 in 2018. It was $100,000 in 2019. That's $300,000 in 3 years. What is it? What is it now that's coming out because it's compounded and coming out this way? And we still face this. So if you're going to build this, let's use a system that we can make sure that the landlords are profitable, that they get their profit. And I'm saying, let's look at the model that's used for utilities, because that's what we're doing for utilities. Show us what it costs, and we'll set your increases. It becomes annual. It does not come compounded. If you're not spending money, you don't make the money. It's as simple as that. And getting there is difficult. I understand that. And I know nobody wants to show their money, what they're collecting or what their costs are. But it's there. And I had to use evidence because I could not find any evidence that would support me until this piece of paper came to my attention. And that's where I want to start. If we're going to do this, how do you keep it where it has to be affordable? Because you're going to lose it. And that's true for apartments, and it's true for housing that is basically being rented. Put it under DSH you have to change their charter in order to do that. Bring Greg's group under DSHA. And then if there's disputes and things like that, you can work those things out under the aegis of a government agency acting as a neutral body.
Thank you, Fred. Anybody have any comments?
Well, I don't know if you, the way utilities work under the Public Service Commission and what you're describing are different. A utility is guaranteed a rate of return on the value of their system and their annual expenses. So it's not just they look and see what the expenses are and then say, here's what you're allowed to make. it's also the value of the system, it's the value of whatever the transmission, distribution thing, et cetera. So look at the total value of the community. And then utilities, to go through the Public Service Commission, I've gone through multiple rate cases. For a small utility that has less than 5,000 customers, it costs $200,000. And this was years ago. I mean, Artesia and Tidewater are spending millions of dollars, and they don't do it annually. They do it every couple of years, and they go in for a big increase, 30, 40, 50% increases because of what it costs to go through the process. So it's very different when you're looking at a public utility that looks at the total value of the system and the expenses, et cetera, to set a rate every couple of years versus what you're describing.
I went to both AI or see whether it was legal or illegal, because I want to know whether it was constitutional. That was extremely important. Again, I'm a newsman. Think of it that way. And I have two opinions. One from AI, which was submitted to DSHA, Caitlin should have it. And the second one was from Carolyn Carter. It's not illegal. Getting to the point that you're trying to make it a fair assessment, it's there. They have oversight. You do not have oversight, but you do have a guarantee, 3.5% plus a half of the CPIU for the district. So you have no oversight on that. We get no value at it. RHP is not going to build, let you plant another tree, which is beneficial for everybody. It's beneficial for everybody. So how do you judge that? You're still going to have to be judged based on what worst operator in the business is doing. And so eventually you're going to either have to control that or close up all the loopholes in the law. The law that was set up to basically make it easy for one particular community owner to rearrange his community so he could purchase a home for 1% of what's being sold is now being used to set any amount of rent that they want, regardless of the 3.5% plus a 0.5%. Why? They do that by threatening a person, I'm going to buy your home after you made a deal. And we haven't even been able to get any movement out of the legislature to get that out. Why should that be? If there's going to be a transfer of the lease, you're disobeying it. Everything that's in section 7013 is being disregarded. You can't force a person to sell to you. But if that person is going to sell, you can buy and raise your rent as much as you want. And that does not help the affordability of houses. That was not the intention. So
This is an interesting conversation, but this also feels to me, for really good reasons, like an issue that would go on the parking lot list. In that, there's a lot here. There's a lot here about how you protect people who are currently leasing mobile homes of various kinds, and how do we protect the tenants. I think that is a great topic, and much along the lines of how do we stabilize and protect existing housing stock.
Meaning actually Senator right here is working on that exact
I'm
bill.
sorry.
You didn't know it, but we're
So we can keep
no, right. I want to mention something. Senator Hoffner's bill, you can just do it as that. So the term affordability is thrown around a lot. First of all, we're private capital, really important. We don't get any government subsidies. We are affordable housing. We are still affordable today compared to other types of housing, way affordable, more affordable than you can believe. We aren't as affordable to somebody who's making $30,000 a year. But nothing is affordable to them right now. So the question is, this is a question of housing insecurity, which is not another parking lot question. How do we deal with those two issues? And what type of responsibility does a private capital investor have for not getting increases or being under rent control? The net result is, just so everybody's aware, by having more regulation, we have less affordable housing. There's no question about it.
I mean, Fred submitted 2 papers that said that.
Yes, I know he has. So the question is, how are we gonna get more affordable housing? Now, we have to have guardrails, I don't question that. But somebody who makes $100,000 or $200,000 a year who's in a mobile home park, in my opinion, shouldn't have guardrails. That's just part of life. Hate to say that, but somebody who's making $30,000 a year needs to have guardrails. Because unfortunately, our industry is changing in the makeup of its ownership, where it used to be all private until about 15 years ago, or majority private, 20 years ago. That's when ELS started getting Grammy. 25 years ago, and now because of that shift in ownership, we don't have that localness anymore. And the out-of-staters, as Fred so calls them, are taking advantage of what's here. So we need to have guardrails, but we also need to be able to promote affordable housing. So given that tension, how are we going to develop a program that's going to allow for more development of affordable housing and not be a disincentive? Right now, we have big disincentives.
Sorry to interrupt. Since we've been talking about affordability so much, I wanted to pause to
Great.
define it. So here at DSHA and at HUD, we consider housing to be affordable if your housing costs do not exceed 30% of your gross income. So it's relative to how much you're making. This is data from our 2023 housing needs assessment. Again, these are figures from 2021, so I'm going to see if we can update them. But this first chart shows the two-person household area median income in the state of Delaware. So in 2021, if you were making the median area median income for the state, you were making $66,000, and you would be at 100% AMI. Obviously, those numbers have gone up a little in the past few years. This second chart shows you the maximum affordable rent prices based on which percentage of AMI you are at. So if you're at 60% of AMI, the max that you can afford to pay in Newcastle County for rent would be $1,134. That's just an example of how to read the chart. So I will see if we can update these numbers, but this gives you an idea of where we are.
So let's just talk about this a minute. It's really important. For affordable housing in the state of Delaware, the way the law is written now, because I'm also responsible for it, Robert had input into it, we have the rental assistance program. No one will build a park that is going to house people or have people live there when it's below 55% median income, because we are restrained on the increases. And if it's below 40% median income, we can only charge 30% of their rent, period, no matter what happens to them. So the net result is we're not going to see affordable housing in the state of Delaware for median income related to manufactured housing below 55%, which is really wrong. That's where we need to be.
That, pardon me, that's a statutory rent cap?
That's a statutory rent.
Yeah.
So we would have to change that. If we're going to, that's a statewide problem now. However, we need to think this out, how we want to change that if we do, because there are people in my community, at least 15, I believe, that are below 40% and do have their rent capped to the 30% limit. This is going to be a big tug of war for us to solve if we're going to really use this as a source of affordable housing in Delaware, period.
And then you have to bring in the cost of the chattel loan for those people who are buying in at 8% or 9%.
It's even more than
I don't know
that.
what it is today. To suddenly, that amount is now well above.
Well, Fred, when we get people, let's say in the 50% median income, they're buying a $10,000 or $15,000 home for us. They're not at the beach, they're in a non-beach area, and they're buying a $5,000 or $10,000 or $15,000 home for cash in most cases. They're borrowing it from a friend or their parents, and that's what goes on there. But I'm thinking about new let's say you could get some government subsidy to pay for part of the home. The problem's gonna be, nobody's gonna build if we have these restrictions on it, and that's problematic.
And that's why we're considering what to do about affordable housing.
Right.
Right.
So let me address two more points of yours, Fred, after, by the way, Fred's drafted, maybe he'll share with the committee, the 10 myths of affordable housing by Jerry Heisler, the great piece, did it about 10 years ago. So the other problem is open books. Again, Robert and I are private capital. We don't see a need to share our information with anybody. We're not getting any government subsidy. The utility commission aspect that you talk about, that Robert already talked about, in reality, I think that would cause for rents to be more exacerbated, because they look at rates of return, they look at a whole slug of things, and the net result is we would probably actually see higher rents than the program we're under now. I think Fred brings up some really valid points of the need for guardrails because of the different ownerships we have in state and out of state. And that's a really critical aspect. But even with what we have in place today, I know I would build a park if some other things were removed, but one of them has to be the rental assistance program. If we're really going to direct ourselves to that AMI level, that's really a big factor in this process.
So it's really, it's a bifurcated question, right?
It
What do we
is.
do for those, what do we as a subcommittee focus on for those who are at 40% AMI or less? And how do we focus? I'm not sure I'm agreeing with what I'm saying, but from picking up on your point, 40% or less, more than 40%. Perhaps.
Well, I look at it as income. There has to be an income level where we don't have these regulations in place. Because there's still a market to be served out there for people who are making $80,000 and $100,000, $150,000, who would like to get into a mobile home
Right.
because they don't want to spend $300,000 or $500,000 on a home. I'm satisfied with a 3-bedroom, $150,000 brand new double wide,
Mhm.
$150,000 double wide. We're not even giving those people an opportunity to be in the marketplace.
So I think this is all fleshing out this parking lot issue, which is how do we deal with people at different income levels, right? How do we protect those existing residents?
Yes.
And how do we address rent issues and expenses going forward? I think it's a whole different conversation. There's some overlap there sometimes, but a different conversation. A different conversation than how do we work to expand the supply of affordable housing, specifically manufactured modular housing in Delaware, given our current regulations, zoning and land use regulations, financing issues. I feel like they diverge a bit. There are pieces of overlap, and I think that these diving down into things like different needs at 40% and below, different needs at 40% and over is a little bit different than the supply charge. You guys tell me if you disagree, but that's how I'm seeing this as a different conversation. I need to read your draft bill.
I don't think it gets that detailed.
Totally different.
Okay.
I don't think it goes that detailed. The fact is, this is a lower cost produced house.
You bet.
It can be put in the field real quickly. It's a great way to solve affordable housing. The private sector is going to do it quicker than the public sector. So the question is, how do we harness that catalog and make it happen?
Yes.
We have all these impediments and disincentives. And at one point in the code, we did have a limitation on the rental assistance program, but we never had a limit on rent justification. And the abuses came about in rent justification where it became lawsuit heaven and everybody was litigating and not really solving the problem. So we don't want to go back to that era. We have very few lawsuits now, if any. And there's a quietness about how rents are being changed.
I just think, I feel like that's a separate issue.
It is a separate issue. We needed, since we're running out of time, we need to move on chattel versus real property. Let me get the definition of chattel, or one of them. Chattel is a catch-all category for property associated with movable goods. A common law chattel includes all property other than real property. Examples include leases, animals, and money. Because mobile homes are wheeled in and have a steel frame around them, they're considered chattel. A modular home is not considered chattel. It's not on the frame, and it's set on a permanent foundation. If mobile homes are set on permanent foundations, actually, it doesn't even have to be set on a permanent foundation. But if it's set on a permanent foundation, you can get it retitled as chattel. I mean, it's a regular leasehold or a regular title to it. My understanding is you can actually get it doesn't have to be on a permanent foundation to get DMV title removed, correct?
DMV
yeah.
comes with the manufactured housing.
It did out in California.
No, yeah, they do it in a number of places. I'm pretty sure you can remove.
Retire the bin once it's on a permanent foundation.
I thought you could get it removed at any time.
It varies based on the county. I know Sussex County really well. I don't know Kent or Newcastle as well, but in Sussex County, to become a Class C, which is where personal property becomes real property, it has to be on a permanent foundation to retire that title. And the county requires that a county inspector comes out and verifies that it's on that foundation before they'll do it. It's only about $30 to get that. So it's not cost prohibitive, but the foundation work is cost prohibitive, you know.
I'll find out the information for each county and get that to us in the next week.
SB 77 passed by Senator Ennis created manufactured housing to be able to be placed on deeds. It passed, it became law, and then it was reversed because the lenders and the insurance companies said, it has to be, you have to own the land. So in terms of the fact that and we actually got our DMV titles back. So even though that my home is on permanent foundation, it is still considered a chattel. Because it is.
No, what you get is a leasehold, you get a leasehold title, Fred. You don't get a title to the ground, you get it for the property itself.
Yes, you get it. But
I have that in a community.
For the house.
But in Ascot Landing, I have leasehold titles. And I used to have there are a couple Fannie Mae loans still in there. Fannie Mae loan will only occur today if you have a 40-year lease on it. And I won't do them because there's too many restrictions in it. So the issue is, I think there are some private markets for leasehold product out there, but you need to have the length in the lease to do it. But I think it's worthy for us to investigate getting this chattel versus non-chattel real property discussion, to have it again, because there's such a big divergence of pricing between manufactured home cost and stick-built housing. I think you're going to see more people using manufactured homes, and I want to make sure we have really good titling capabilities in the state for that.
If we go back to the definition of real estate, you know, real property, real estate, it includes the land. When I took real estate classes, and if you look at the code of ethics for the National Association of Realtors, the very first thing is first there was the land. The land is real. Anything that's put on it is considered chattel until it's attached and deeded. So we can't turn a leasehold home into real property because the land is not included. The real property isn't a part of it.
But banks will finance a leasehold. That is possible, and that's what we're trying.
Yeah. Lots of banks will finance the leaseholds.
Right.
Yeah.
And because of that, we want to be able to get that as an adequate solution for manufactured housing in the state of Delaware.
They use the argument that it's a riskier investment because you don't own the land, you just own the home that's sitting on it. And I've had lenders tell me that the house could be taken away in the middle of the night they've never, they've obviously never moved a manufactured home. They don't just disappear in the middle of the night.
So what they try to do is get a 10 to 15 year additional time period beyond the mortgage period.
So, because if they would, we have leases
Right.
that modular and stick-built homes, and as long as the lease is long enough,
Yeah.
40 years, the mortgage rate is the same as if it was a stick-built house and you own the land. There's no difference. They finance it the exact same way.
Yeah, they've told me that as long as the lease term is as long as the loan term, they can do that. The problem is with leased land houses, leased land manufactured houses anyway, we generally have the 1-year auto renewing lease. And then you have lenders who are lending for 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. So there's a disconnect there in the time periods.
Like in Putnam, we do 12-year leases, and part of that is that same reason. If you have a longer
Okay.
lease, you can then go with the financing. I mean, First Shore Federal, some of these banks, the rates are really not bad.
They're wonderful. They're not much different. I have a rate sheet showing 7.5%. That's not terrible. We're at 6.5% right now on traditional homes. So maybe we could do something with the lease terms to allow them to be financeable rather than having 1-year auto renewing. Maybe we need to think about something with that. But I don't know why they're 1-year auto renewing leases. I just know that most are.
Well, so this is the tension between that. Personally, I don't want to go for long-term leases because let's say Fred was successful in getting a really restrictive rent control policy of 1% a year increase. That's all I was allowed. I would promote my community, and that's the problem with getting longer term leases. And that's one of the fear a landowner has, that the legislature will come in and say, you know, I'm pissed at Jerry Heisler today, and therefore we're gonna really do it to him and just make 1% increases available to him for the rest of his life. So I'm gonna sit there and say, I gotta turn the community off. So
Right.
I'm gonna be careful that how we approach this. I think it's a really necessary thing to look at, but we have to make it all in a framework that works for everybody. Otherwise, we're not gonna get anywhere.
Right. Well, with Rob's properties like Baywood, how do those leases work? Does it increase each year, even though it's a multi-year, like it's a 40-year lease, but it's not a static number for 40 years, is it?
No, there's the potential for annual escalators, and there's caps on them.
Yeah.
And then in Potnets, it follows the state code, but in Baywood, there's annual escalators with caps. It's a CPI or maximum percentage increase, so.
Jerry, I would give you 2%.
That's better than what I got when Brent Chester.
Have 13 minutes.
Yeah.
left. We do need to leave time for public comment.
Let me just take one more issue, which is number 5. Entitlement design-based regulations. The biggest constraint on us are getting the entitlements. That's obvious. I don't know how that'll change unless we go to, and that's why I linked them together. The ability to put units on single lots or multiple lots as a way of addressing it, but also having architectural standards. Is that a way to go? They've had bad experiences in some communities where the architectural standards are so restrictive, you can't build anything to begin with. So, you know, they say you have to 9-foot ceilings, I'm making that up, but 9-foot ceilings or 10-foot ceilings, like the rest of the houses around there and so on. So there's no way they can do that in a manufactured home. So the net result is, how do we want to approach this? It's worth healthy discussion. I included a couple papers on that. I'm going to get some more for us. And so we can look at, and I'll probably put everything up on a Google Drive so everybody can access it easier. And
the other thing would be interesting is to look at, probably one of your main focuses of business is kind of these accessory dwelling units, and how do you allow a smaller secondary unit on a single family lot? What are the guidelines around it? Because I know the state of Maryland's done a lot of work on that, and it's been pretty successful.
Yeah, I was on the task force there, and there was a statewide task force, and they kind of ceded everything still in local jurisdictions. They basically said, we're not gonna touch it. California, on the other hand, they basically cranked down the local jurisdictions, said, I don't care, we've got a problem, you've got to allow. Massachusetts now has by right, which again is a term that has some definition, and I'm not quite sure of what that means, but they're, in the state of Massachusetts, you can now, on a single family lot, have a home half the size of the primary as an ADU. And whether manufactured or modular can fit into that is an open question. I think Sussex and Kent County have both taken steps to allow accessory dwelling units. Sussex, I think it's only outside of the incorporated towns, right? The 13 incorporated towns do it, but
So this is called equal treatment, is what it's called, equal treatment laws. And
So just to say, I think this is actually the crux of what I was thinking about, when I was talking about maybe joining the committee. How do we deal with our existing regulatory structure? Who else is doing what that might be applicable here? California's model isn't gonna work here because the housing regulation system is different than here, but there are models, I think, across the country for manufactured housing and modular housing, ADUs and others, that might bear research. To see
so,
how
well,
it
part of
might
the problem is they fall into two categories, regulated and unregulated. And the unregulated for manufactured housing, such as Wyoming, there are no laws.
I'm not talking, I'm
But
looking
what-
for,
In the regulated marketplaces, manufactured housing generally, unless it's in the rural areas, like in rural New York. Just doesn't flourish. And there's such a bias against manufactured housing from its perception, they put up very restrictive regulations. Maryland has gone to a home rule type situation, so you're seeing moderation in some areas. Chevy Chase, Maryland, you're not gonna see anything. But if you go down to Queen Anne's County, you're gonna see in some areas more of it. And the question is, where do we wanna float in that? Do we leave it to the counties? We leave it to some of the county, Newcastle County, you're not gonna see it in a lot of areas. I'm working on a micro home community up there, and it's like putting a prison or a manufactured home community next to it, so the problem is consistently, where you have density, you have opposition. Where you have no density, no opposition to some extent, unless it's in southern Newcastle
But
County.
nobody wants to go where there's no density.
You know, and just even looking like in Sussex County, if you want to go, if you're a farmer and you have a parcel next to your field, and you want to put a home, there's age restrictions on those homes you can put there. You can't just go find some home that's
Exactly.
20 years old and put there. You've got to go through the Board of Adjustment and all this stuff. Well, a home that's 20 years old doesn't look much different than a current modern home that's, you know, brand new. So, I mean, there's some stuff that's outdated that maybe, you know, I think as part of this task force, I think it's almost like you force each county and municipality to go back and look at their existing code and updating it and getting rid of things like that.
But I think we have to, if we really want equal treatment, I think we really have to mandate some standards for it.
You know,
But the real question is gonna be, is the senator gonna be here after next term? Because if she's in Greenville, senator, and we mandate in Greenville, Delaware, they're gonna be putting up manufactured homes next to $4 or $5 or $10 million homes, that senator's gonna be blown out to the wall. They trashed the pocket community up there. They reversed it after it was approved. So the question is, how do we come up with standards that meet all needs?
and not so much do we come up with it, but how do we lay the groundwork so and the incentives so that individual communities can, like, what could we do on the state level to deal with some of these infrastructure issues? I have no idea that it could cost you $80,000 a lot just for infrastructure.
Well,
So
one thing,
how do we work with?
And that might go up.
but see, part of the problem that we're not gonna deal with this community, and Robert and I are both experiencing this. In the last couple of years, I don't wanna pick on DelDOT, because I always get pick on them, but DelDOT has come up with the idea that any improvements that are near your subdivision, you have to pay for them. So I took an old mobile home park, I'm repositioning it like Ascot Landing, putting modules in there, doing less units, having less traffic, and yet I'm gonna have to put in a $500,000 traffic intersection improvement. Why? I'm generating less traffic. Tough luck, see you later. And they were gonna make me move a water line on top of it because it was an inch, maybe too high, close to the surface, an inch. So these are real dollars and yet affect affordable housing. If we really have to deal with these dollars,
Yeah,
something for the bigger community, guess what? You're not gonna have any affordable housing that won't work.
so I come out of real estate development, so these are issues I kind of grew up with, and I absolutely agree with you, these have to be part of our focus. How can we deal with these costs? Who else can help?
I think they're a bigger committee because they're everybody's fault. I have it in every project I do. I'm just not manufactured housing. I think we have to look at some manufactured housing stuff.
But I'm saying again, if it costs $80,000 in a
What
lot
kind
of
of incentives can
infrastructure.
you create?
And the purpose of this is to create more affordable housing through the vehicle of manufactured housing. Will the state government play a role in helping offset some of those costs, some of those infrastructure?
Or allow a developer to bypass certain things.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
Can we deal with regulations? Can we deal with financing structures?
Just an announcement for everybody. So tomorrow is our first regulatory and permitting subcommittee meeting. It starts at 10:30 a.m. It's gonna be in the Hazlitt Armory, which is right down the street. So I would encourage everybody who's here today to tune into that meeting as well. There is a Zoom option. But yeah, the regulatory and permitting subcommittee is going to be looking all at, zoning, design, density, all of these things. And I think it's a good thing if we talk about the same things in this space, right? If the full task force hears similar recommendations from manufactured housing subcommittee and regulatory and permitting subcommittee, then hopefully, those recommendations will get passed and will be implemented. So
I thought you were gonna tell me to stay in my lane.
no, I think.
This is everybody's lane.
I mean, that's one of those issues, it's no matter what type of housing it is, it's gonna be the same issue as far as cost.
Absolutely. So we come at it through how do we deal with manufactured housing and modular housing with some of these issues? What's special about what we're trying to do? What's special about the products that we're talking about? That distinguishes it from stick them, and what do we need different than that? But also, absolutely, what's the same? If this state cares about increasing production of affordable housing, what dollars are they willing to put in to support that? Not just the SHA tax.
There's only one thing that makes it special, and that's Fred.
Get up and over my way,
Yeah, that's right.
to that effect.
Okay, so for folks online, if you would like to give public comment, please raise your hand. Because we are almost out of time, we're going to give folks 2 minutes to speak. So I will just wait a moment to see if anybody raises their hand. And you can also send written public comment to housing.taskforce@delaware.gov. Any comments received within the next 48 hours will be appended to the meeting minutes for today's meeting. I am not seeing any raised hands, so at this point, I will turn it back over to our chair for any closing remarks.
I will get some additional papers out, everybody put a Google Drive up.
Great.
And you as well, and the representative, and then, I would like to probably have another meeting in 2.5 weeks if we can, it could be on Zoom if you don't mind, can it be on Zoom? Or does that,
We already have another meeting scheduled.
but I'd like to have a little workshop on some of those papers, or do you want to just do it then? And if we need another one, can we have another meeting after that?
So maybe, and I'm saying maybe because, we have to give proper notice, right? We have to, even if
All
we're
right.
doing a workshop, we have to announce it 7 days ahead of time. I would have to create a whole new Zoom link, so we can touch base offline to get that.
We'll figure something out, I think we need to, I think the papers are helpful, some of them are academic, but some of them are pretty easy to read.
Hopefully, we'll have more time this time between
Yeah.
when we got this done and when is our next scheduled meeting? I forgot.
Um,
Because I'll catch up. I read the headlines and I started the one you were going through on the barriers. But I promise I will have read all the rest by the time we get together.
our next scheduled meeting is November 19th. So that's, I don't know, 3.5, 4 weeks from now.
That's great.
Oh, we'll just wait till then, we'll do it then,
Okay.
Yes.
we'll need another meeting
We
though,
can also
I'm
just
sure.
read the papers and sort of have our thoughts together.
November 19th.
Could I have one topic, just as a
Yeah.
broader topic that I just think would be interesting to talk about is the public relations perspective. Because I think we can talk about subsidies and helping people do it, but there's such a pushback, and it's something that I find, not just with manufactured, but just smaller houses. That there's a huge pushback against it and a public perception pushback, and what the right angle. Whether it's a public relations campaign or something to say that, look, I was in a modular housing community in Jersey at the shore, and you would never know it. It was wonderful.
Let me give you a little perspective on that. When the Unified Development Code in Newcastle County was passed in 98 through Tom Gordon and Sherry Freeberry, the buffer size on a manufactured home community around the community was 600 feet. That means the community was actually smaller than the buffer, an average sized community. And I was talking to Tom Gordon one day, he says, well, when you get density, you get crime. When you get smaller houses, you have people who make less money, so therefore this and that. There's a social perception, a cultural perception about small houses and the people that live in them. The real fact of the matter is, we're not even addressing crime. It's like most of our communities, I actually got Carl Cluthers, I think at the University of Delaware, is a professor, criminologist, and he actually ran the crime database for me for zoning we did in '88. And we found out that manufactured home communities by nature, at least in Delaware, are the safer communities. Just a fact, they are safe communities, and for a lot of different reasons, but there is a perception. And we have EMTs, we have teachers, we have the foundation, our communities live in these homes. I don't know how to, I could talk to them blue in the face.
Sure.
Nobody's cares or wants to believe me.
Yeah, and like I said, I feel like that's a big thing that needs to be addressed, is that you can talk about it, you can change something, you can do all this other stuff, but the perception to try to, and like, you're not gonna turn it 180 degrees, but maybe kind of steer the ship a little bit towards, look, that the world of when you saw that graph of where there was tons of these homes, and especially pre-HUD homes that are still out there, so perception associated with that. How do you, I just want to kind of throw it out there as maybe something we should talk about going forward, and how we can message it so that it is more acceptable to a broader audience.
Well, I had the law changed in Dover, where the law does not, we're not a trailer park, we're now a manufactured business. Because ours is upscale, and most of them are not upscale, but nonetheless, to be able to provide the dignity for the people who are there and addressing it. And I'm in a unique position of being an advocate for manufactured housing. As housing, and to be able to get changed laws that in essence respect the communities. Our laws in the city has better protection than anybody in the state. You have to get a receipt if you pay your bill. The reason, because the law says after you don't pay for four times, they can move you out. If you have a receipt, you have proof. That's not true in the state. We had a task force that would not even pass that. Those laws say you have to clear the driveways in the communities. You have to clear the mailboxes in the communities. You have to clear the fire hydrants in the communities. There's a lot of little things that are there that that the city requires that aren't required elsewhere, and try and bring dignity to those communities individually so that they know if you have a problem, give us a call, we'll take care of it. So,
But part of the other problem is we're conflating NIMBYism with all this too. You can build $1 million homes,
Sure.
and people are still going to be against it. So people have this entitlement theory beyond their property line, that they're entitled to this open space, or they're entitled to lower traffic. What they don't realize is, without having economic vitality, the value of their home goes down. So,
You like eating in nice restaurants, people that work there have to have a place to live.
but they want them to come from another state,
That's
and
right.
we're dealing with that.
That's it, that was mine.
Just really good, and I'll stop. Last real estate place I worked was Silicon Valley, and I worked for a nonprofit up there, and we did every year, we do affordable housing tours. Get a couple of buses, get some sandwiches and boxes, get as many elected as we could to come with us and visit properties that were owned and managed by the different developers in the region. And it seemed to at least loosen things a little bit. Anyway, just a thought.
It would be nice if there was a PR campaign for them, because one of the documents that Jerry shared ahead of this meeting talked a lot about how, the public perception is that these houses can burn down in 15 seconds and these houses are less efficient and these houses blow over in storms and, never live in a mobile home in a storm and all of that. And the data shows that all of that is untrue, especially when you're looking at houses that are built to HUD code. So a PR campaign, especially, oh my gosh, if we could eliminate the word trailer, I would be so happy. When people call me and want to see a trailer, I'm like, oh, I don't sell trailers, but I do have some manufactured homes, and I'm just one little voice trying to do it. But boy, if there was a TV campaign, something with some ads from Disha or who knows from who, I don't know who does that kind of stuff. It would really help to just shout out how energy efficient they are, how wind resistant they are, how fire resistant they are. They're safe homes. One of the things that I read just said that they tend to be located in places that don't have shelters nearby. They don't have a building nearby where everybody can go in a tornado. And, other homes are closer to those sorts of facilities. But in manufactured homes, you don't have a basement to go to, and that's why we maybe have some more deaths in those communities. But there's just so much around it. It's the redheaded stepchild of the real estate industry. And I wish you could change that. Yeah.
Are we good to close the meeting?
Yes, we are.
Wonderful, okay, so our next scheduled meeting, again, is November 19th. I believe it's here in this very same room. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you for coming today.
And we are adjourned. Thank you all.